Good morning, Daytona on a Monday. Who's excited? Let's talk Xfinity series. Before we get into Xfinity, the thing that I always like to address is the idea that lives in my head, which may or may not be true. It's this belief that the Xfinity series is less volatile at the super speedways than the Cup series and the Truck series. We know that the Truck series is bananas, and we know for the most part that the Cup series pretty wild too. But there are times that we have this picture in our head that the Xfinity series isn't really that crazy, and that's heavily influenced by a handful of spring Daytona races over the years, or a Talladega race here and there, where we expected chaos and mass carnage, and we didn't get that. And that lasting image has hung with us and has told us that, oh, the Xfinity series isn't as chaotic. The reality is that it is just as chaotic. Now, maybe the summer race is wilder than the spring race, but if we just go back and look at optimal lineups, we're going to clearly see that the average starting position going back to 2016, if we look at the optimal winning lineup at Daytona, the average starting position is 26th. That sounds, or 24th. I can't read numbers. If that's the case, then it seems like there's going to be plenty of carnage and chaos. Now, you could be a little bit more suspect of that number and say, well, maybe that number is influenced more by the summer because we're doing an average than the spring. That's fine. But still, if you want to even dial that down a little bit, still pretty wild. And you can still chase place differential, and I would still chase place differential. It's just a lot of the reasons we lean into the idea that maybe it's not that chaotic is that we are often chasing place differential in the Xfinity series that we're not comfortable with. That's really what is, in your subconscious telling you, well, maybe these races aren't that crazy. Maybe they're not that wild. Look, let's pull up some recent names. As I drop my phone on the treadmill, man, I'm juggling a lot of stuff this morning. Glad I got the audio issues fixed as far as I know. All right, come on. Let's look at some recent Daytonas. And the idea, like in the Truck series, you can pick anyone. So it's not really that uncomfortable. It's easy. It's fine. You can legitimately roster no-name trucks and not worry. And a Cup series, most of the equipment and talent is pretty equalized. And so you can stack in the back even the non-preferred options and still feel pretty comfortable. And the Xfinity series, when you're stacking in the back, there's drivers that you're not comfortable with. There's equipment that you're not comfortable with. And that maybe seeps into your subconscious, and you tell yourself, I don't want to stack them back because these races aren't that crazy. There's not as much carnage or chaos. So maybe the real reason that you're saying that is because you don't want to have to make the decision to play Garrett Smithley or Chad Fincham or Cesar Baccarella. But as you see, Dega in the summer, or actually fall, they were in the winning lineup. I don't want to roster David Starr. I don't trust the car that he's in this given week, whether it's a Bobby Dotter or a Carl Longride. I'm rostering Jason White. I don't feel comfortable. You wouldn't, but it's a stack in the back. We look at Daytona 2022 in the summer. Maybe you feel fine with Brandon Brown, but are you really comfortable with a lineup of Timmy Hill, Ryan Vargas? I can get on J.J. Yaley, Kyle Sieg, sure, but it's not a comfortable lineup, but it's definitely a stack in the back. Then you see this Dega lineup, like, well, see, it's not that crazy. It's not that crazy. I don't have to stack in the back with these no-names. Yeah, that is a bit of an outlier. It's going to happen. If you think that's going to happen, fine. Talladega last year, Cesar Baccarella, Joey Gase, Ryan Ellis. Ryan Ellis wasn't a bad driver. Alpha Prime's not a bad car. he had to get to 11th from 36th. A lot of cars had to fail for him to get there. You're going to have to take some unpleasant picks. You're going to make some decisions on drivers that may not be the best. Joe Graff, tons of experience. Did you really want to pull the trigger in a super speedway race when there were other options? Well, you had to make that decision. This was probably the scariest of all. Parker Retzlaff starting 16th. Okay, let's look in real quick at the sheet. So, if we look at previous results in the super speedway races, a top 6 score, the cut line is about 52 fantasy points. If we end up playing the top 6 drivers, they're going to need around 52 fantasy points. So a good place to start is to ask with every driver, can you legitimately see them getting to 52 fantasy points? So based on my projections, and then the 52, you can see how close to how far away. Like Jeremy Clements, going to be tough for him to get 52. Even if he finishes the race in 7th, which would be a wonderful day for Jeremy Clements, he's only at 37 fantasy points in that situation. He's a very cold snowflake for me. Same thing for Retzlaff, Alfredo. Simply starting too close to the front, can't really score any points. And you can slap any name on there in any car. I mean, the Jordan Anderson equipment, the Chris Auer Motorsports equipment, not turds by any means. You could put a good car in 9th place. It's tough for them to score. I mean, look, Parker Kligerman, SVG, Van Gisbergen, it's going to be tough for them to score fantasy points based on their starting position. The only way that Austin Hill gets it done, he really needs to lead a significant amount of laps in this race. He's really the only guy up front. AJ can squeeze in there too if he also leads a significant amount of laps, but that's not a guarantee. He could just run up front. It's very risky. Hill is very risky, but I think a little bit safer just based on what we have seen Austin Hill do at the super speedways over the last, his entire career, even going back to the truck series. He's very comfortable. The cars have been very fast. He has the starting position. He proved that he's fast in qualifying. His teammate was like 3,000th of a second faster than him. Maybe Austin Hill takes the lead right out of the gate. I don't see why Austin Hill would do his teammate any favors and say, all right, Jesse, we'll let you have this one. I see Austin Hill as a guy who definitely wants to get into the Cup Series, and he needs to get out front and continue to establish himself as an elite super speedway racer. That being said, I'm not really interested in rostering any of the guys in the top 10. And you can see highlighted, just the sheet reads that if they are likely or there's a probability that they can score 52, which gets them above the cut line, then they're going to be highlighted. Now we move down to the spot of the sheet where the sheet loves these drivers. 11 through 22, this is where we're seeing a bunch of people, even though we know that the average starting position is 24th. But these drivers can score over 50. Sammy Smith, if he finishes second, can get you there. He would be maybe my least likely guy I want to roster, just because he doesn't have as much of a safety net. So you will get a little bit lower ownership. And it really depends on your build. If you really need to go sneaky with Sammy, but he can't be completely written off the board because he could get to the front, but he could also finish 3rd or 4th and not end up awful. That would knock him down to a little bit below 50, and you could see someone else just scoring more fantasy points than him. Sheldon Creed, possibility. He also needs to get onto the podium. A little bit more of a safety net, but it is Sheldon Creed in the end. Sam Mayer, as we go back closer to 20, you feel a little bit more comfortable. And the fact that you're not playing Sammy or Sheldon Creed makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. Let's see, Mayer, decent at Atlanta, maybe not the best representation. Not great at Daytona. Did get a second place finish at Talladega, but his overall plate numbers, as you can see in the sheet, haven't been the greatest. Top 10 rate, not very good. Okay, I guess, but not really in love with Sam Mayer either. Jeb Burton doesn't qualify. I get him projected to finish 5th. Just misses. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on him. I don't know if I need to go there. I don't know if I really want to go to these guys, but I don't know how much stack in the back expect chaos is going to play out. If this race is still chaotic, you could still see some of these guys being fine and 3 or 4 of them in the optimal lineup. And I have no problem with that. I mean, as long as Cole Custer doesn't wreck, is it safe to expect him to finish 3rd? I would argue yes. That gives him 55 fantasy points he's in. If Daniel Suarez in the colored car doesn't wreck, is it safe to put him in the podium? Maybe you don't want to be as aggressive. I get that. But that does seem like a likely outcome. 56 fantasy points, that's an optimal lineup spot. Same thing can be said of Chandler Smith, Ryan Truex. I mean, you were betting wreck or no wreck at this point. They are far enough, deep enough in the field. The average starting position is 24th, 17th to 20th. That's fine. There is plenty of opportunity for them to get to these 50s. But that being said, imagine all 4 don't wreck. Then only a couple can get into that podium. So the idea of rostering all 4 is not on the table. That could happen. It would be a strained series of events, but more than likely, if all 4 are able to avoid a wreck, which that statistically seems like an anomaly, well, the one thing that can't happen is they can't all finish 3rd. Someone's going to slide down a little bit. The one that slides down, obviously, is going to score fewer points. They're going to get knocked out. And we're going to see someone from the back have a good day as well. The score's around 55 fantasy points, but the idea of rostering all 4, no. How many is too many? You really got to like this group of 6. And if I were to rank, I'd take Custer 1, Chandler Smith 2, Ryan Truex 3. I'll take Josh Williams 4. It's going to give me a little bit more place differential, a little bit more wiggle room. Salary if you need it. I don't believe that you are going to need it. Plenty of experience. Suarez is right there too. And also Suarez, just name recognition is probably going to carry a little bit more ownership. Not that I think that really is even going to matter. Worrying about leverage and ownership is really overblown at these super speedways. Everybody's playing this guy, so I'm going to do this. Or everybody's building this way, so I'm going to build this way. And that's fine. It's something to talk about and to go on about ownership and game theory and who's going to play who. And maybe that makes more sense at an intermediate track or a short track. But in this race, you're really just trying to pick 6 drivers that aren't going to wreck. It doesn't matter. Ownership doesn't matter. Leverage doesn't matter. Game theory doesn't matter. The name of the game, and ask anyone who's won one of these, is they randomly pick the 6 drivers that didn't wreck. I'm sorry. We cannot predict who wrecks or not. But if you pick 6 drivers that do not wreck, you're winning money and maybe a lot of money. You do not need to sit here. But what if someone else rosters? Who cares who they roster? If they roster a guy that doesn't wreck and you didn't pick him, that's on you. You should have picked that driver, but you're too much worried about, well, this guy's going to be popular. People don't like Brandon Jones for X amount of reasons. So I'm going to go heavy on Brandon Jones. And then Brandon Jones wrecks because one of those X amount of reasons is he's not a very good driver. That comes down to you. It's tough. You're just trying to predict people that don't wreck. I am bullish on this area. They all can finish high. Like Brandon Jones only has to finish 6th. If he survives the wrecks, there's a very good chance that he is going to finish in the top 10 and around 6th, which is the average finishing position of a driver in a winning optimal lineup. Same thing could be said of Williams, like that spot. This is the area where you're going to get a little sick. This 23 and back. And they're going to end up in your roster. There's going to be enough wrecks. There's going to be enough survival and attrition that some of these jokers in the back are going to slide through. So we'll start deep in the back, move forward as we wrap up the show. If you have any questions, fire them my way. BJ McLeod, starting dead last. Brandon's guy. No problem playing BJ. Missed the cup race. His financing's halfway decent anymore. Wants to go out there and prove a little bit. Wouldn't be surprised to see BJ McLeod being a little bit more aggressive than normal. It's plenty of experience-ish, although, what? Yeah, not a lot of experience. Usually let someone else drive his car, but he's done Cup Series races. He knows what he's doing. I'm not worried about experience with BJ McLeod. Typically, it's motivation, and I would say he is motivated. Not saying lock him in, but he's not as easy as a write-off as he is in other weeks at regular tracks or even at some super speedways in the past. Probably a little bit more added motivation. My heart says play Frankie Muniz, Malcolm in the middle. My head says no. Might be in over his head a little bit. Sometimes that can work out. If he's scared and passive, he runs in the back and he avoids all the wrecks and carnage. He does have some ARCA super speedway racing under his belt. He did do a full ARCA season last year. He just strikes me as a nervous cat, which it shouldn't be, as a Hollywood star having to do filming and all of that, living in the spotlight. He shouldn't be, but you see him on the track and he just seems really scared at times. But again, that being scared could be a positive. I wouldn't rule him off your board, but you would feel much more comfortable with Ryan Ellis, because at the end of the day, what are we doing? We're chasing place differential, we're chasing finishing position, and all you got to do is simply ask yourself, who has a better chance of moving closer to the front? It's a no-brainer. It's Ellis in better equipment with more experience. He knows what he's doing. You have no problem going there. Dawson Cram squeezes into the race. I would much rather play Ryan Ellis, but Johnny Davis cars can finish these races. But we get into the conversation of, all right, can Cram and Ellis finish? Yes. Who will finish closer to the front? The Johnny Davis cars do not necessarily have the track record of getting top 10s in these races unless it's absolute chaos. Blaine Perkins hasn't done much successfully at the super speedways, but we have seen seed cars in the past, like Jeff Green, do really well. If it's absolute chaos, he's on the board. If it's just a regular old decent amount of wrecks, I don't think it works. Brendan Poole, this time he's with Tommy Joe Martins. We like this equipment. We know when Poole gets halfway decent equipment, he actually got pretty good results out of crap equipment in the past. He's definitely in play right there with his teammate Ryan Ellis. If you're stacking in the back, you're taking some of those guys in the teens, or maybe even as foolish to take Aaron Hill, Austin Hill, starting up front. Aaron Hill is a second baseman for the Blue Jays once upon a time. Sage Karam, Sam Hunt Racing, it's fine. As we saw last summer at Daytona, he was in the optimal lineup in a pretty chaotic race, but he survived that chaotic race, had enough car to get to fifth, even though everybody had enough car to get to fifth in that race, but the Sam Hunt equipment's fine. Ryan Sieg's likely going to carry a lot of ownerships. Who are the incompetent drivers? Well, So far on the incompetent end, really the only one that I would completely rule out is Frankie. I don't really love Dawson Cram's equipment. If you want to hold that against him, Sieg's going to make it. Decker is in the same category as Frankie, someone that you really just can't trust as a driver, but her equipment's probably a little bit better. She does have some experience in super speedways in the trucks and the Xfinity series, at least more than Frankie does. You could easily see her freak out, make a stupid mistake, and things go wrong. Everyone looks back at that Bristol race where I don't know if it was completely her fault, but her and her spotter just got into an absolute crazy fight, and she couldn't even get the truck off the apron. It was a pretty embarrassing scene. Decker is more of a YouTube influencer these days, so if you had to file her into a category, you probably would put her in incompetent. Jordan Anderson starting 29th. Should be very popular. The sheet likes Anderson. I believe when the optimizer ran, took all these guys and jammed them in. But again, remember, that can't happen because they can't all finish on the podium. I have ceiling projections in, so this can't really work. It really loves those guys, but it also loves Jordan Anderson. And he should be very popular. Again, going back to it, well, if everybody's playing Jordan Anderson, I'm going to do the leverage game. Well, there's a reason why Jordan Anderson is going to be popular. His equipment has been pretty good in the Xfinity series at the super speedways. He was good in the truck series. He's a pretty decent super speedway racer himself. He can score a lot of place differential points. If you're going to play him or not, it's just simply a matter of, do you think he's going to wreck? Haley Deegan with the AM equipment from Moffitt, no problem here. You want to take her? Fine. Do you think she wrecks? Yes or no? If she doesn't, how far will she push it? She's got the equipment to push into the top 10. That's really what we want to see. I've got her at 12th, though, which I think that would be a really good day. And 12th, though, is only 47 fantasy points. As you can see from 24th to 35th on your screen, not a lot of these drivers are qualifying for 53, 52, 55, 50 fantasy points. And that means they finished just below the top 6 on average. I'm being a little conservative with some of these because if there's just enough chaos, you can probably bump up the projection on any one of them. You can bump up Anderson or you can bump up Deegan, and maybe they do slide into that 52 range. But where it stands with a conservative projection, it's really hard. Garrett Smithley, 14th. Could he get a little closer? Yeah, but right now I only got him at 38 fantasy points at 14th. I mean, you even pump him up to 10th. He still doesn't get there. A 10th place finish from Smithley gets him to 47. That's not going to get it done. Leland Honeyman, I'll bust him up to 15, which I think is more aggressive. That's not going to get it done. Kyle Weatherman getting to 12th. Let's go a little bit aggressive because he's been around for a while. Still only 49 fantasy points. That's not going to get into the top 6. Now, if we get some chaos, then yeah, they can bump a little bit forward. They'll push a little bit further. If I had to roster these guys, and you're going to have to, you can't avoid it. You're going to have to make decisions between 20 and 38. The guys in the 30s are probably where I'm going to lean. They're good enough. They're not that much worse equipment-wise than the guys in the 20s. They get 10 plus more place differential points. And in really all the circumstances from 23rd to 38, we're relying on chaos. If there are wrecks and chaos, that's really the only way. Now, maybe Daniel Dye's a different situation in the colored car, but he doesn't have a lot of experience either, and he could very well be one of the guys that wrecks. But for the most part, the 20s and the 30s, there's not a lot separating the equipment. There's not a lot separating the driver talent. So what does separate them is the opportunity to score more place differential points. If there's a wreck that allows Kyle Weatherman to move forward, that same wreck is going to allow Ryan Ellis to move forward. And Ryan Ellis gets to score more place differentials if half the field gets taken out. That's where I would go. I think that's where most people will go. So you can probably deviate by going into a Haley Deegan. I don't think I really want to go any further up than Kyle Weatherman. I'm fine with Daniel Dye. I'm fine with Josh Berlicki, Haley Deegan. These are all pivoting a little bit. You want to get stupid and get Decker in your lineup because it's fun. Go ahead. Ryan Sieg should be very popular. Sage Karam should be popular. Poole, Ellis also. I think the next slot's going to be Cram. And then Frankie and BJ at the bottom. Those still work as well. Because I think BJ is going to push it a little bit more than he normally does. Frankie, if he can just survive the wrecks, should be okay. I just worry about his upside. If he finishes 22nd, that's only 35 fantasy points. He really needs a ton of wrecks and to be aggressive at the end. And I don't think he's going to be aggressive at the end. And so among the survivors, he may be the last of the survivors. That's going to do it. I'm going to talk Cup Series in a second. If you have any questions, fire them my way. Sorry about the audio issue at the beginning. Figured it out. Not sure what that was. Getting to recap, I'm not going to go Galaxy Brain and roster the guys up front. Although we have seen plenty of lineups in the Xfinity Series where an Austin Hill starting second could end up in the optimal lineup. Or Jonathan Nemechek. He's slightly deep enough that maybe the place differential is close, right? He actually qualifies here. If he can get up there and lead some laps, he's going to shave off a fast lap here or there, obviously. And then win the race, then he's on board. Teen seems to be where you want to take 2 or 3 drivers, and then you'll make your decisions with the riskier ones in the 20s, the riskier ones in the 30s that just simply have the ability to score more fantasy points. All right, that'll do it. Race4thePrize.com.